So I think we're going to finish the third chapter of Mary Poppins Comes Back. It's Bad Wednesday. Mary Poppins, or not Mary Poppins, Jane has been pulled into a bowl that she cracked by triplets who wanted them to meet their sister, but she was really to meet the great-grandfather who told her she is trapped 60 years in the past. But she gets to be the youngest because she's tired of being the oldest. She's not happy. Jane is calling to Mary Poppins for help. "Quick! Hold her! Hold her close! Surround her!" She heard the great-grandfather's sharp command. She felt the four children pressing close about her. She shut her eyes tight. "Mary Poppins!" she cried again. "Mary Poppins!" A hand caught hers and pulled her away from the circling arms of Christina, Valentine, William, and Everard. "Heh, heh, heh!" The great-grandfather's cackling laugh echoed through the room. The grasp on her hand tightened, and she felt herself being drawn away. She dared not look for fear of those frightening eyes, but she pulled fiercely against the tugging hand. "Heh, heh, heh!" The laugh sounded again, and the hand drew her on, down the stone stairs and echoing corridors. She had no hope now. Behind her, the voices of Christina and the triplets faded away. No help would come from them. She stumbled desperately after the flying footsteps and felt, though her eyes were closed, dark shadows above her head and damp earth under her feet. What was happening to her? Where, oh, where was she going? If only she hadn't been so cross. If only... The strong hand pulled her onwards, and presently she felt the warmth of sunlight on her cheeks, and sharp grass scratched her legs as she was dragged along. Then suddenly a pair of arms, like bands of iron, closed about her, lifted her up and swung her through the air. "Oh, help, help!" she cried frantically, twisting and turning against those arms. She would not give in without a struggle. She would kick and kick and kick. "I'll thank you to remember," said a familiar voice in her ear, "that this is my best skirt, and it has to last me the summer." Jane opened her eyes. A pair of fierce blue eyes looked steadily into hers. The arms that folded her so closely were Mary Poppins's arms, and the legs she was kicking so furiously were the legs of Mary Poppins. "Oh," she faltered, "it was you. I thought you hadn't heard me, Mary Poppins. I thought I should be kept there forever. I thought—" "Some people," remarked Mary Poppins, putting her gently down, "think a great deal too much. Of that I'm sure. Wipe your face, please." She thrust her blue handkerchief into Jane's hand and began to get the nursery ready for the evening. Jane watched her, drying her tear-stained face on the large blue handkerchief. She glanced round the well-known room. There were the ragged carpet and the toy cupboard and Mary Poppins' armchair. At the sight of them she felt safe and warm and comforted. She listened to the familiar sounds as Mary Poppins went about her work, and her terror died away. A tide of happiness swept over her. "It couldn't have been I who was cross," she said wonderingly to herself. "It must have been somebody else." Mary Poppins went to her drawer and took out the twins' clean nightgowns. Jane ran to her. "Shall I air them, Mary Poppins?" Mary Poppins sniffed. "Don't trouble, thank you. You're much too busy, I'm sure. I'll get Michael to help me when he comes up." Jane blushed. "Please let me," she said. "I like helping. Besides, I'm the eldest." Mary Poppins put her hands on her hips and regarded Jane thoughtfully for a moment. "Humph," she said. "Don't burn them." "Then I've enough holes to mend as it is." She handed Jane the nightgowns. "But it couldn't really have happened," scoffed Michael a little later when he heard of Jane's adventure. "You're much too big for the bowl." She thought for a moment. Somehow, as she told the story, it did seem rather impossible. "I suppose it couldn't," she admitted, "but it seemed quite real at the time." "I expect you just thought it. You're always thinking things." He felt rather superior because he himself didn't ever think at all. "You two and your thoughts," said Mary Poppins crossly, pushing them aside as she dumped the twins into their cots. "And now," she snapped, when John and Barbara were safely tucked in, "perhaps I shall have a moment to myself." She took the pins out of her hat and thrust it back into its brown paper bag. She unclipped the locket and put it carefully away in a drawer. Then she slipped off her coat, shook it out, and hung it on the peg behind the door. "Why, where's your new scarf?" said Jane. "Have you lost it?" "She couldn't have," said Michael. "She had it on when she came home. I saw it." Mary Poppins turned on them. "Be good enough to mind your own affairs," she said snappily, "and let me mind mine." "I only wanted to help," Jane began. "I can help myself, thank you," said Mary Poppins, sniffing. Jane turned to exchange looks with Michael, but this time it was he who took no notice. He was staring at the mantelpiece, as if he could not believe his eyes. "What is it, Michael?" "You don't think it after all," he whispered, pointing. "Or you didn't just think it, after all," he whispered, pointing. Jane looked up at the mantelpiece. There lay the Royal Dalton bowl, with the crack running right across it. There were the meadow grass and the wood of alders, and there were the 3 little boys playing horses, 2 in front and 1 running behind with the whip. But around the leg of the driver was knotted a small white handkerchief, and sprawling across the grass, as though someone had dropped it as they ran, was a red and white checked scarf. At one end of it was stitched a large white label bearing the initials M.P. "So that's where she lost it," said Michael, nodding his head wisely. "Shall we tell her we found it?" Jane glanced round. Mary Poppins was buttoning her apron, looking as if the whole world had insulted her. "Better not," she said softly. "I expect she knows." For a moment Jane stood there, gazing at the cracked bowl, the knotted handkerchief, and the scarf. Then, with a wild rush, she ran across the room and flung herself upon the starched white floor. "Oh!" she cried. "Oh, Mary Poppins, I'll never be naughty again." A faint smile twinkled at the corners of Mary Poppins' mouth, and she smoothed out the creases from her apron. "Humph!" was all she said. And that's the end of chapter 3.